Have you ever noticed that writers and seekers after truth and love share some common ground? They all learn to pay close attention to the particular, bring kind attention to things as they are, surrender their ideals, and develop a tolerance for the ordinary, commit to an ongoing process, and finally, perhaps most important, accept failures, loss, wounds, and rejections without making them too personal. A broken heart is guaranteed. Two experienced teachers of writing and life's lessons invite you to a special weekend of conversation and contemplation on writing and true love at the Omega Institute in Rhinebeck, New York on Friday through Sunday, June 8th through June 10th, presented by Paula Young-Eisendrath and special guest Mark Matousek. We have both Polly and Mark together to give you some insight about this workshop, but first let me tell you a little bit about each one. Paula Young-Eisendrath is a PhD. She's an engaging and imaginative speaker, a Jungian analyst, a psychologist, and an author. She has 13 books published that have been translated in more than 20 languages, including The Resilient Spirit, Women and Desire, and The Cambridge Companion to Jung. Mark Matousek is an international best-selling author, teacher, mentor, speaker. He's previously been the contributing editor to O, the Oprah magazine, and senior editor for Andy Warhol's Interview magazine. And Mark's work is devoted to showing you how to achieve creative and spiritual freedom through self-inquiry. So, Polly, let's start with you. Writing about true love, where do you start when writing about love?
Love actually is in some ways grounded in knowing deeply the person that you're meant to love and then accepting that person just as he or she is, not really wanting to change a hair. And so that process of getting to know another person, accepting the person, working with your own wishes, fantasies, desires, is very much like writing in the sense that we have an idea, we have a creative project in mind, and we get going at it, and it turns out that it needs to have its own truth, its own authenticity, and that we have to accept a lot of failure, limitation, correction along the way to bring it into itself. It's really the case for me that there are these similarities between having a close, good relationship with a beloved partner or child and learning how to write in a way that is authentic, free, creative, daring, that there are these similarities.
It's beautifully said. I mean, for me, the two similarities, primary similarities, are passion, which is obviously a part of loving, whether it's romantic love or love of a child or love of a parent or love of a friend. They're all fed by the heart that is open to a shared experience with someone that you deeply care about. And the second piece is that as in love, a piece of writing reveals itself, like Polly was saying, as you go more deeply into it. And you have to be willing for that to happen. And it's a fine line between creating and following or surrendering and responding to what appears in the act of writing. You're attending to the work in the same way that you attend to someone in relationship. You have an idea about them, but that idea should not be a fixed idea. It's the same thing with writing. You're pointed in a direction, but the direction has to be flexible and it has to be able to open into surprises and mystery. Both writing and love have mystery at their center. And so that's what we're going to be working on over the weekend is how do we stay open to mystery, because creativity comes from not knowing in the same way that loving someone comes from not knowing and not fixing them in a box. And it's going to be very interesting putting the two together.
Polly, what kind of catalyst can someone use to open themselves up and jumpstart their writing?
Most of the time when I work with people who are writing, they actually do have some ideas or some fantasies or some project in mind. My experience is that the getting started part is not so much the difficulty. It's after you get started and things don't go in the direction you want, or you're up against some sort of deadline or some sort of demand of something, and you begin to break down in the creative process. And that's where I think you need the jump start. It's where the sort of writer's block or the kind of creative sit down, where you're just not doing anything, comes in. To my mind, this is where some of the exercises Mark and I will be doing will be especially important in getting people to be more playful, to look at things from a point of more mystery, more not knowing, being willing to go through some very negative feelings in order to get to something that might be surprising or more true than what you ever thought. From my point of view, at least, the blocks and obstacles in writing, often after somebody's project or ideas have already been launched, and then there's an obstacle.
Well, it's absolutely true. In relationship, in a love relationship, just as in a writing relationship or a relationship to a piece of work, negativity is bound to arise and obstacles are bound to arise. And one of the exercises that I do is around fear and desire, and how when we want something very badly or someone very badly, there's a tendency for fear, or what registers as fear, to arise. And what I work with students is in distinguishing what's fear and what is passion. They can feel very similar. It's like the difference between genuine prohibitive fear and something like stage fright, which is actually excitement masked as a kind of fear. So it's learning to tweak those different feelings apart in the act of creativity, the way you have to do with love, and continue moving forward and toward the person you're intimate with in the same way you do with your writing when these demons come up, which they're bound to do. It's working with fear, it's working with desire, and it's understanding, too, that obstacles are inevitable and it doesn't stop. Some people have the idea that if they're feeling blocked, there's something wrong, and that's not my experience at all. What happens, I find, as students approach the truth, and sometimes they're the scarier, more forbidden truth, the secret places, this resistance will come up and say, you can't go any further. And the same thing happens in relationships. When you're pressing your boundaries, often there's a piece of self that wants to withdraw, retreat, and play it safe. And you can't love and play it safe at the same time, in the same way that you can't be creative and play it safe at the same time. So what we're going to be doing is encouraging the students to push their boundaries and to open to a lot of these scarier feelings, like fear, like stage fright, and use it as fuel to keep going forward. You're sometimes driven by a certain kind of anxiety that really wants to break itself open.
So you're going to be doing techniques and exercises to help people literally open themselves up to writing deeper.
There are some exercises and some insights that people will be getting about their relationships, because our closest relationships are often the most difficult relationships that we have in life. In other words, we have an easier time getting to know the neighbor than actually getting to know our own children in a way that is authentic and clear, or getting to know our parents or a partner. And there's the question always, why is that the case? Why is it so difficult to really love the people that you love? And that's because there are these obstacles, and it is not a straightforward process. It's not like, you have this wonderful baby or you have this incredible partner, and then everything is just happy ever after. It's almost the opposite. It's like you start with that, but then it goes downhill fast, and then you have to know what to do. There'll be poetry, there'll be exercises, there'll be writing exercises, mindfulness exercises, some of them in couples or pairs, putting two people together, and some of them solo, that will help people with these kinds of rough spots in their relationships. It seems to me this is a real 2-for-1 kind of experience to be able to work on your writing and work on your relationships at the same time.
I'm anxious to know what each of you thinks about this question. Is it better to write about a broken heart or an open heart?
They're the same thing. Really, you can't have an open heart that hasn't been broken. You can't love if you haven't been wounded. The word blessing comes from the French for to wound, blesser. Love and creativity are both a kind of blessing of the self, and using that blessing to connect with the world. I don't think you can have an open heart without having had a broken heart. And I know for me as a writer, if I'm not working from some place of complicated emotion, I was going to say pain, but it's some sense of complication, the work doesn't really move. It doesn't go anywhere interesting. I have to be deeply engaged, and that engagement tends to have some conflict in it. So I welcome that complexity and that conflict because it takes me deeper into my writing. So one of the things I want to work with students around is being comfortable with conflict, being comfortable with the sense of unsettledness and unease, because very often creativity comes from those places. It's a cliche to say that the best work comes from loss and pain and suffering, but it actually does. I haven't seen a whole lot of great writing come out of, except from mystics, come from bliss and ecstasy. So it's to become comfortable with conflict and to not be afraid of it. I think an open heart is a prerequisite to creating beautiful work, moving work, and I think the same is true of love. You can't love unless there's a chink in your armor. You think so, Polly?
I agree with you entirely, really. Sometimes it's a little difficult for people to see that an open heart and a broken heart is the same thing. You know, it's like the well-known lines in a song by Leonard Cohen that there's a crack in everything, and that's how the light gets in. In order for your heart to be open, you have to be totally willing for it to break, because otherwise you've just isolated yourself from the conflicts that you must go through in order to know another person. There's no way to know another person without the resistance, without the coming up against the difficult places. For your heart to be open, you have to be willing for it to be broken. And one of the things that I say when I'm teaching about love is that love actually is the training to break your heart. It's like you take a vow, whether when you have your child or when you're in a relationship with a friend or a partner, the vow is to remain interested in this person, to remain connected. And to go through that process of remaining interested is going to break your heart. So, when you vow to love, you vow to break your heart. That is truly an open heart. And once your heart has been broken enough times, it's really so open. People who are going to be drawn to this are going to be people who actually want to love again, or who are trying hard to love and to write. The interesting thing about the heart is it is this kind of way that we touch each other, and it always, brings us pain as well as this expansive sense of joy and this knowledge of ourselves. So I agree with you entirely about the open heart and the broken heart being the same thing.
Who is it, Polly, that you would like to see at this workshop? Who's going to benefit the best or the greatest?
Well, I think anybody who's wrestling with writing as a project, an expressive, a creative project, or even writing in a journalistic way, just wanting to put down in words something about her or his experience, I think those people will benefit very much. I mean, I actually think those will be the people that will be drawn. Now, the other folks, the folks that might be coming because they're having difficulties in their relationships, in a close relationship, they're going to find out that writing actually is helpful for that. I would say probably a lot of people that are going to be drawn to this are going to be people who are wrestling with the writing project. And yet I hope to find some people will be there who haven't done much writing at all, but are coming because they want to understand how to love better or how to get through a kind of a conflict to a truer place in their love relationship.
Mark, who are you interested in having at the workshop?
I think anyone who's interested in self-inquiry, that to me is the prerequisite to engaging with a weekend like this, is wanting to ask questions and wanting to peel back the layers and go to the places in oneself around love and around writing that may be a little hard to go to alone or confusing, where people want to shed some light. And the thing that I wanted to add about a broken heart is that writing also breaks your heart, because any piece of work that you pursue is going to disappoint you. It's going to change the same way people do in love, and you're going to want to throw it away. Some people do throw it away, and what I want to talk to people about is, what is that moment of rejection? What's behind that moment of rejection? And how can we stick it through the hard times? Because any project, any writing project, will bring days when you absolutely can't face it, and you wonder why you started it at all, the same way relationships do. And so if you can't accept disappointment, and if you can't tolerate disappointment and the disillusionment with your own vision, it's very hard to do a sustained piece of writing. It just inevitably happens. And the trick is to be able to be interested, like Polly's saying, in what it's becoming, because what it's becoming is actually going to be more original than the idea that you had to begin with, in the same way that relationships turn out to be much more interesting if we stay interested in them. That's what a lot of people don't do. We tend to turn off and go into kind of rote thinking and stop paying attention. The weekend's a lot about paying attention to our own process, about paying attention to our work, and about paying attention to the people we love and what we don't understand about them and what we would like to appreciate more about the people we love.
Would you both agree that it would also be useful for professional counselors and therapists who wish to use the techniques with their clients?
Totally. I'm glad you mentioned them. I almost always do have a group of people who come to the teachings I do about love who are working with families and couples. And yes, this will be applicable and might even be a surprise to find out how writing is helpful in regard to working with your clients. I wanted to add from your earlier question, Mike, when you ask, is it better to write from an open heart or a broken heart? And I hadn't really answered that question, but I think that in a way Mark and I are saying that the broken heart is the real necessity in the creative process and in the process of loving someone over time. It's that willingness to be non-heroic, to be crushed, to go through what you really hadn't wanted to go through, that when you go through it, that you get into the transformative process that is at the root of true love and creativity. And it's the hesitancy to go through that process. And so in a certain sense, I would say that the broken heart is really the place of true writing, yet a broken heart and an open heart are the same. I just wanted to get back to that because I thought I hadn't answered the question. But yes, counselors and therapists and psychologists and psychoanalysts, I think, would all find this to be very, very fascinating territory to cover.
Well, it sounds like an exciting workshop. And anything else that either of you would like to add before we close and give people the opportunity to sign up for the workshop?
I'm excited about this weekend, to be able to spend the weekend together working, getting to know each other as we get to know our students in that gorgeous place. I mean, Omega is just the most beautiful setting for self-exploration, and it'll give students enough alone time that they can have a personal retreat, an individual retreat, as well as being a part of the group. It's going to be a spacious schedule. It's important that it be a creative experience. I'm looking forward to it. I actually can't wait.
Yeah, I agree with Mark completely, and teaching with Mark will be wonderful and particularly kind of interesting because things will emerge that neither of us has anticipated, and I imagine that that will happen with all the participants, that this will be an event that kind of takes shape in the midst of the activities. As Mark was saying, there'll be plenty of time and space to allow that shape to come about. It will be more like a poetic, mindful, emergent, creative weekend. And Mark and I doing a dance for the first time together. That should be fun.
Absolutely. Both of you, thank you very much. Once again, it's at the Omega Institute in Rhinebeck, New York on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, June 8th, 9th, and 10th, presented by Polly Young-Eisendrath and Mark Matousek. And right there on the website, you can sign up for the workshop. It's very affordable, and for what you're going to be receiving, a great opportunity with Polly and Mark speaking, writing, and working together with great exercises and information to help you experience more of your life through your writing and to dig deep and to help yourself and others experience more of what you have in your life and in your heart.